Because in the end, ultimately, you will come through this, whatever.
Because once this is resolved, then I can focus on this, and then I can focus on
get back
this,
to that.
and so on and so on and so on. So the trick is to minimize all the other things. It's a bit like on a computer. If you have a whole lot of programs running, the system's slow. You've got too many balls up in the air. How do you do this? You know, and that's the basic principle. So often what happens is, and life is like this. There's always a lot going on, and people take advantage of that. It's what pressure selling is all about. Because they throw a lot of options at you, a lot of possibilities, and it's like, fries the brain. Too many possibilities, the system shuts down. And that's not useful. So the reality is in this instance, choose one thing, and because that's the thing you need to get certainty on. And if you've got, let's say, half a dozen things, prioritize them and say, right, I'm going to work on that. Shut everything else down. Because ultimately, that's the most important. Yeah? So often the reason why we can't gain certainty is because we don't have the headspace. That's really important. And how we get headspace is putting other things off. If but for half an hour, 3 hours. I talk in terms of, from a business point of view, there's no crisis so big that it can't be put off for a few hours. Unless the business is burning down, or unless you work for the stock exchange. And if you want to work for the stock exchange, that's your problem. But generally speaking, there's no problem that can't wait until you're out of a meeting. And that meeting might be with yourself to sort this thing out. And sometimes we can put things off for some days. And I'm not talking about procrastination. While I'm sorting this out, which is more important than this. And often what happens is people take advantage, put us under pressure. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, the next thing is, and we've spoken about this, lack of information. Now, what you have to do is go hunting for more information until you feel comfortable. But the question is, have I got enough information? I'm feeling indecisive, I'm really indecisive. If you're only focusing on this one thing, let's suppose, if you've done that already, you're focusing on the one thing, feeling indecisive, have I got enough information? Yeah, I've got enough information. Okay, now what? Or no, I haven't. Go find some more. Simple. Is it?
Time.
We'll talk about that too. Okay. Lack of permission. It's a very common one. I can't make a decision because I don't have the permission. Or I don't allow myself to have the permission. Often we've been brought up not being given the permission. Well, I couldn't. Someone else would make that decision. So, never allowed to. You've got to be good. So to be good, to do the right thing, someone else it's the man that must make the decision on this. So often, it's not about being good, or being, in this context, a good girl, or even a good boy. Too many boys in the room tonight. Is that football? And also doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is, well, my mother would have wanted me to do it this way. Or my father would have, he says the right thing is this. It's morally this or it's morally that. You may not agree with it, but society states. That's lack of permission, and you've got to investigate that. And often, unfortunately, to work that one out, you need to talk to someone who kind of understands those principles. Kind of dig it out and go, well, why do I feel like I haven't got permission? And often we don't feel like that. It's worth just questioning and going, I don't feel like I can. Well, why? What's stopping you? Well, I need to ask. I need to get someone else's agreement, which is the follow-on to that. Is having someone else's agreement can do two things. It can make you far more powerful. Fabulous. So two people agreeing on something, you can really move forward. But the need for someone else's agreement. Often we go, well, if I can get someone else to just agree with me as well. It's almost like I'm now giving some of that responsibility away. So be careful. Or we go, well, they agreed with me. How often does that happen? Well, so-and-so also agreed. Well, this is your decision. So be careful of that. But what is powerful is that if you're really clear and you get someone to agree to help you, that project often moves forward a lot quicker. Because people are in agreement. And they're all going in the same direction. And there's a certain energy about it, people's agreement. Okay. Any questions so far on that? So here's the thing. Why do we make bad decisions? Besides what we've just spoken about. Because people make bad decisions. It's very common. Anyone? Can't decide.
Not enough info. Not enough info.
Probably, and it's part of it.
Time pressure.
Time pressure. Now, what happens with that? Just pull that sentence apart.
Well, if you feel
Time pressure.
if you feel, yeah, if you feel that you've got to make a decision by the end of the week, you make the decision because you've got to do it by the end of the week, not actually having
Enough. Yeah.
and probably not enough information gathering or discussion. Or
As a general rule, a big reason why people make bad decisions is because they feel like they're under pressure. Or feel pressurized by someone else. Even though it might be, it's time, often that time is represented by another person. And often the reason we make bad decisions is because we feel under pressure. Okay. And a lot of people will just abdicate altogether and just not make a decision.
Some people will make decisions and feel they've got to make the decision regardless.
Sure.
No one said anything about it.
But that's their feeling of being under pressure. That's what I say. They feel like they're under pressure. They feel they have a deadline. It may not be there at all. But the reality is that if we have a deadline and we're working on it, we shouldn't just go, well, actually, here's the deadline, now we've got to make a decision. If we haven't got enough information, it's completely inappropriate. We must put it off. If we've been working on it, if we've just been putting it off and procrastinating, different story. But then that's our problem. It's often, and it's a whole other lecture about procrastination. But the reality, the reason why we tend to feel under pressure is because there's another person, system, society, entity, something out there that is running their agenda. Does that make sense? So, we are under pressure because of someone else's agenda. It's often a work situation, but it's usually someone with an agenda. The reason we feel pressurized is because there's someone pushing us to do this. Yeah? And the reason they have an agenda is because they've already worked out what it is they want. And they're pushing us in that direction. That's the general thing. That's the agenda business. Like, I know what I want, now I must just push her in that direction. See if I can get her there. I'm feeling more pressurized. Well, just make up your mind. All right then. Great. And often we feel guilt because we haven't made up our mind. But beware, if somebody pressurizes us into making a decision, and based on guilt, we will often resent them like hell. And they will often land up in big trouble. But that's a whole other story. Okay.